الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue inshallah ta'ala with الرسالة, the book of ذم قسوة القلب وذكر أسبابها وما تزول به. Ibn Rajib rahimahullah. Yesterday we covered the first two parts of the Risala about ذم قسوة القلب and how that قسوة القلب, the hardness of the heart, is something that is forbidden for a Muslim to allow himself to have a hard heart, according to what's mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ of the meaning of having a hard heart, and this is one of the characteristics of the disbelievers. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us not to imitate them and to take the means to soften the hearts, and it's a continuous act. This is something that a person needs to be upon the entire life till he returns to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to understand the means that if a person fall into these means, it would lead him to such an evil state of the heart. But even with that which is a disease of the heart, there are cures to it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ما أنزل داء إلا وأنزل له دواء. There's no disease that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought down unless there is a dawa and a cure to it. And the diseases of the heart, all of the means of cure of it is clearly stated in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and we have been sufficed for. There is no need for other ways other than the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ to cure the diseases of the hearts. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned clearly that Al-Quran shifa in more than one place in the Quran. وَنُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ وَرَحْمَةٌ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. That we bring down in the Quran what is shifa and mercy to the believers. Shifa is the cure, not medicine. Right? So when they say the Quran is dawa, as some of the ulama pointed out this, which is a very delicate and an important point, the Quran is not medicine for the heart. The Quran is cure to the heart. People might take medicine and it might not work for them. Work for some people, doesn't work for other people. But the important is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used the word shifa. The Quran is cure. So what's left is for the person to apply the meaning of how to make the Quran shifa. So if the Quran is not cure to a particular person, it's not because the Quran is not cure, it's because the individual, he has mawani'. He has things that stopped him from receiving the means of cure of the Quran. And one of which is qaswatul qalb, the hardness of the heart. And the means that he mentions here in the book, and with being patient with oneself, and the Quran is the cure and is the shifa. So this goes, as we said, both ways. Continue inshallah ta'ala, because the risala we need to finish it by today and tomorrow inshallah. He says وَأَمَّا مُزِلَاتُ الْقَسْوَةِ فَمُتَعَدِّدَةٌ أَيْضًا. So assuming that we already remember what's mentioned yesterday, then muzilatul qaswa. The al-muzilat is what ma tazulu bihi al-qaswa. Al-zawal is when something is removed from its place. So muzilatul qaswa, the things that removes the hardness of the heart, that prevents the person with whatever level of it. There's qaswa that makes the person a disbeliever, wal-'iyadhu billah, qaswa of the sins, the qaswa of the bid'ah, and it's all diseases of the heart. And it's not, again, just some feelings that a person gets, but it's following the way of the Prophet ﷺ. So there are many of these muzilat. He mentioned some of them. He says, فَمِنْهَا كَثْرَةُ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ الَّذِي يَتَوَاطَأُ عَلَيْهِ الْقَلْبُ وَاللِّسَانُ. كَثْرَةُ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ, the much remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the one that يتواطأ عليه القلب واللسان requires participation of both the heart and the tongue. The dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is definitely the best way and the most effective way when it comes to removing the qaswa, the hardness of the heart. And there are so many ayat in the Quran, a hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And as mentioned yesterday, the example of the rain to the rocky ground that is very tough to have any plants in it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings the rain down, and it's mentioned in the Quran in more than one place because this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives life to the hearts, as it's mentioned in Surah Al-Hadid. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that how He gives the life to the dead hearts. And Allah yuhyi al-arda ba'da mawtiha. That and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give life to the earth after it's been dead. So the same thing, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give life to the hearts. أَلَمْ يَأْنِ الَّذِينَ آمَنوا أَن تَخْشَعَ قُلُوبُهُمْ لِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ وَمَا نَزَلَ مِنَ الْحَقِّ. So the more the person indulged into the dhikr of Allah, till he becomes addicted to it, then this is the constant removal of the hardness of the heart. But he mentioned here, الَّذِي يَتَوَاطَأْ عَلَيْهِ الْقَلْبُ وَاللِّسَانِ. This is the highest level of the dhikr, when the heart is and the tongue upon the same thing. And at-tawatu, that means they're both together on the same way. That not the heart is in one place and the tongue is another place. And one of the levels of the dhikr, which is not the best state, but even though it's still rewardable, if someone is making dhikr with his tongue, but the heart is completely in a different way, it's not together with the tongue. So a person is saying Subhanallah, Subhanallah, or reading Quran, and his heart is thinking about his job, his family, the worldly things, even matters of the hereafter. So the heart is distracted from what the tongue is saying. It's still not something for a person to stop making dhikr. No, he should continue to make dhikr, and it's a rewardable dhikr, of course, but it's of a lesser level. And the benefit of it, if there is benefit, it's very small, especially with the recitation of the Quran. Rewards, yes, and it's one of the means to establish the effect of the Quran. And if a person says, I'm not able to focus, should I stop reading? No, continue to read. And the more the person reads, the more that it opens the heart for the time where he would reflect upon the Quran. So never to say, I would read less or stop to read because I'm not focused and the heart is not with the tongue. No, to continue that, but to put the effort in making the heart together with the tongue. And this is where the real benefit. And that also comes with the ilm, with the knowledge. When a person reads the Quran and he's focused on what is being recited and having the heart being affected by it. If the ayat talks about the Jannah, as if he sees the Jannah, he hopes for the rewards from Allah. If the ayat talks about the hellfire, he fears Allah, and he even stops and make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah protect him from the hellfire. Focus the presence of the heart, his heart, hudurul qalb, the khushu' of the qalb, the humbleness of the heart. And that's why there are many different etiquettes, especially with recitation of the Quran, that the ulama made books, the etiquettes of reciting the Quran and setting a specific time of the day, the best time of one's day, the most time that a person has more focused on is to sit and read his portion of the Quran that he would read every day, removing the distractions from his life and focusing on recitation of the Quran, and to be patient with oneself, learning the Quran and reciting the Quran, reflecting upon the Quran. And it doesn't have to be that it's only one way altogether. So more than one wird, more than one time that he would sit and learning the Quran. There is dars of a tafsir that he listens to. There is time where he sits and he recites, time that he reflects upon the meanings of the ayat, even if it's each one short period of time, but it's all about the consistency. And habbul amali Allah adwamuhu wa in qal. So this is the Quran and the adhkar. That's why there's shughul, there's our life, we're supposed to be busy. There's no time to waste. And that is by following the way of the Prophet ﷺ. But first, what he says here, قال المعلى ابن زياد إن رجلا قال الحسن. A man said to Al-Hasan al-Basri, rahimahullah, one of the great tabi'een, that his kalam, his speech, as the ulama, they said, كان يشبه كلام الأنبياء. His kalam is like close to the kalam of the prophets, because he took the wisdom from the household of the Prophet ﷺ. So they said to him, Ya Aba Sa'id, that's his kunya, أشكو إليك قسوة قلبي. I complain to you about my hardness of my heart. So he said, قال أدنيه من الذكر. أدنيه from الدنو. Make your heart close to the dhikr. This is the cure of this disease, is to make dhikr of Allah. Because the qasawa of the heart, this dryness of the heart, it's because of the lack of the source of all kinds of nourishment to the heart, which is the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So adnihi من الذكر. Bring it closer. Bring the heart closer to the dhikr. Once the dhikr gets into the heart, then it removes the hardness of the heart. So the most important thing at this point here is to know the importance of the dhikr. So knowing the importance of the dhikr. And then what is the meaning of making dhikr? What's the proper way of making dhikr? Because as agreed upon, and this is the benefit of learning the aqeedah and the sunnah, is that we don't make dhikr the way that we desire. This has already been established and it's finished and it's completed, which is following the way of the Prophet ﷺ, and it's again not according to what a person feels, but with al-ittiba'. وقال وهيب بن الورد نظرنا في هذا الحديث فلم نجد شيئا أرق لهذه القلوب ولا أشد استجلابا للحق من قراءة القرآن لمن تدبر. He said we reflected, we looked over this hadith and we didn't find anything that is soften the hearts more, that encourages adherence to the truth and the recitation of the Quran for the one who contemplates upon it. And also with regards to what a person looks at. Even, for example, if someone is a student of knowledge, this is essential for someone that is seeking the knowledge of the deen of Allah to have his special time with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to recite, special time for him to make qiyamul layl, the ibadat, not to neglect himself. And even when some of the early generations of Islam, when they talked about the majalis of al-hadith, even when the majalis of the hadith talks about ilmul rijal, talking about this person and that person, and this is such a great jihad fi sabilillah to protect the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from any fabricated narrations and so on. So they would talk about men, the narrators of the hadith. This is a liar, this is someone that makes lots of mistakes, this is... So the more they would say these types of things, they might feel the heart gets hard because it's talking about individuals. So they would stress these meanings that they need to then work on themselves, even though they're doing a great deed, protecting the ummah from harm. But with that also they would not forget themselves and what they are in need of with the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's nothing more softening to the hearts, وَلَا أَشَدَّ اسْتِجْلَابًا لِلْحَقِّ, and there's nothing more intense in bringing, we talked about al-jalb yesterday, jalb al-maslaha, nothing that would brings the truth to the heart, min qira'ati al-Qur'an, better than the recitation of the Qur'an, liman tadabbara, for those who reflect upon the Quran, and that's the fruit of reciting. Reciting, so a person would contemplate. And we talked about at-tadabbur, to look at the end of things, to focus on the meanings of it, not the concern of linguistics and things like this, but to how can I benefit from the Quran. And we talked about how, like Imam al-Ajuri in his book, Akhlaq Hamalat al-Quran, the manners of the carriers of the Quran, that the person would ask himself these questions. متى أكون من المتقين متى أكون من المحسنين. When am I going to be from the people of taqwa, those who are mentioned in the Quran? When am I going to be from the muhsinin? Like this. He doesn't have to say it physically, but that's what the heart is focused and is working on this. Then he says, وقال يحيى ابن معاذ وإبراهيم الخواص دواء القلب خمسة أشياء. The cure, the medicine for the heart is 5 things. قراءة القرآن بالتفكر, reciting the Quran with التفكر, with thinking, with reflecting. وخلاء البطن, emptiness of the stomach, as mentioned before, the excessiveness of eating prevents the person from having the focus and the presence of the heart and the softness of the heart. وقيام الليل, and قيام الليل, the night prayer, as stated in the Quran and the Sunnah. والتضرع عند السحر. If a person is concerned about qaswatul qalb, and this is the first part of the book, it's supposed to give this life into our heart. This is something that is very dangerous. When someone is being, إذا خوف الإنسان, if someone try to make you scared of something, right, and he make sure that you understand that this is a very scary thing, what happens? Then we have to take the means. Human beings, they have the ability to act when there are times of fear, and some evil ones, they manipulate them so that they make them in fear so that they follow them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yukhawwifu ibadah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making us fearing the punishment of Allah so that we take actions and not to relax the matter. So if a person knows this, that means he has to take the measures. He has to put effort because this is a dangerous thing to let the heart to be in state of hardness. So one of which is التضرع عند السحر, to make intensive dua before Fajr. As-Sahar is the last part of the night, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised those who seek forgiveness from Allah at this time. وَالْمُسْتَغْفِرِينَ بِالْأَسْحَارِ. One of the characteristics of the believers that they make istighfar before Fajr. And that's a sign of truthfulness and sincerity. Someone waking up before Fajr, of course making the night prayer, and that's how the early generations of Islam, they would extend their night in Salah and then they sit before Fajr to make istighfar as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered them, to seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is one of the great means to remove the hardness of the heart. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees what's in the heart. وَالتَّضَرُّعْ عِنْدَ السَّحَرِ وَمُجَالَسَةُ الصَّالِحِينَ, and sitting with the righteous ones. And this is also one of the very important means. Everyone has details when it comes to text from the Quran and the Sunnah. And enough that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded the Prophet ﷺ himself, and he's the best man ever walked on the face of earth. وَاصْبِرْ نَفْسَكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ رَبَّهُمْ بِالْغَدَاةِ وَالْعَشِيِّ يُرِيدُونَ وَجْهَهُ. وَاصْبِرْ نَفْسَكَ, make yourself patient to be with those who invoke Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the morning and in the evening, seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, seeking to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the day of judgment. So in the ayah defines as-salihin. Who are the salihin? Those who are busy with the ibadah of Allah, seeking knowledge, making ibadah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, away from sins. Sitting with them is one of the means of the cure to the heart. And that's why the Salaf used to visit one another for that reason, to soften their hearts. When they see someone from the righteous ones, that soften the hearts. And as they mentioned also that the opposite hardens the heart. The more the person sees the disbelievers, the more his heart becomes hard, because they don't remind him of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They remind them of sins, they remind them of ghafla, forgetfulness. They remind them without even having to say anything, that this worldly life is about just going to the max when it comes to seeking whatever you desire. So these things makes the heart becomes in state of forgetfulness. So especially environments like this, a person has to take means to sit with those who are righteous, and nobody can praise anyone. فَلَا تُزَكُّوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَعْلَمُ بِمَنِ اتَّقَى. Not to say these people are righteous, I will sit with them. Allah knows best what's in the hearts. But what appears to us. And of course the righteous ones, they will be in the masajid. So to make it upon oneself, to come to the masjid and to sit with those who are upon the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and the shaitan won't leave them alone. So to be busy with what needs to be done, not to be distracted also with matters that would divert the heart. So mujalasat as-salihin. And there is nothing better for a person, especially when someone is new, repented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, than to have someone righteous upon the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ to be means of guidance, instead of being deviated with all kinds of wicked things. So these steps, each one is important to take, and it's instructions for us so that we make sure that we don't miss it. Then he says, وَالْأَصْلُ فِي إِزَالَةِ قَسْوَةِ الْقَلْبِ بِالذِّكْرِ قَوْلُهُ تَعَالَى الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَتَطْمَئِنُّ قُلُوبُهُم بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبُ. وَالْأَصْلُ, we know what the word al-asl means, right? In the fiqh, from a fiqh perspective, and also here it means this, asl, the default, the fundamental things, the principle in removing the qaswa, the hardness of the heart, is with the dhikr of Allah. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the umda, this is the asl in the evidences. الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَتَطْمَئِنُّ قُلُوبُهُم بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. Those who believe and the hearts are in state of tranquility, and whose hearts find rest in the remembrance of Allah. أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبُ. That indeed in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest, and الطمأنينة, tranquility, rest. And the meaning of rest is that it's not all over the place. Because when the heart is going to the east and the west and up and down, this is where stresses and disturbances and all kinds of sicknesses and diseases, the heart needs to be focused on one thing. And this is where Ibn al-Qayyim and others, they talked, and Sheikh Santami, about jam'iyyatul qalb. Jam'iyyatul qalb is to bring your heart together on one thing. And this is what we need in whatever we do. If a person is doing his job, he needs to have his heart together in whatever he's doing. If he's reading his Quran, the Quran is all together in reading Quran and the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings this tranquility of the heart. The heart becomes calm, becomes in state of tranquility, and the tranquility descends as a result of the dhikr. So this is the asl in removing the qaswatul qalb, the tuma'nina of the heart. وقوله تعالى الله نزل أحسن الحديث كتابا متشابها مثانية تقشعر منه جلود الذين يخشون ربهم ثم تلين جلودهم وقلوبهم إلى ذكر الله. In the ayah says تلين جلودهم وقلوبهم. Al-lin is the opposite of al-qaswa, the softness. This is what al-lin means. So their skin and their hearts will soften إلى ذكر الله, to the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The beginning of the ayah, Allah nazzala ahsan al-hadith. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down the best hadith, the best statement, which is this book, the Quran. Kitaban mutashabihan. The Quran, mutashabihan, its parts resembling each other, the meanings all together, repeated throughout the Quran. Mathani, that means it keeps on one meaning after the other, each other in goodness and truth, oft repeated. تقشعر منه جلود الذين يخشون ربهم. The skins of those who fear the Lord shiver from it, from the fear of Allah. And this is how the effect of the ayat, when a person recites the ayat of the punishment of the nations before, the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the ayat that talks about the hearts being hard, the hearts of the believers becomes in that state. But then those who fear Allah, and that's why we have to question our hearts and its purity when we don't find this. And therefore we have to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our hearts and to remove the things that deprives the person from the fear of Allah. ثُمَّ تَلِينُ جُلُودُهُمْ وَقُلُوبُهُمْ إِلَى ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. This happens when a person is reciting the Quran. His heart is full of fear, and then ثُمَّ تَلِينُ جُلُودُهُمْ, then it softens. If they have the qash'arira, the goosebumps, then it goes away, becomes soft, and the hearts becomes soft ila dhikrillah, to the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when they see the ayat that talks about the hope for the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Quran itself, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is one of the great effects of the recitation of the Quran and understanding the ayat of the Quran. And if a person doesn't find it, he should make himself, when I say, we don't say fake it, but can someone fake it to himself? Meaning that he makes himself fear when he doesn't feel it. It's not a feeling. It's like when a person is alone, not in front of anyone. If the ayat talks about weeping and the person doesn't find himself weeping, he makes himself weep. Not in a physical way, but in more focusing on the ayat. The ayat makes you fear. It's a decision to make, actually. It's not, I'm waiting, nothing happened. No, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلَا تَخْشَوْهُمْ وَخْشَوْنِي, that's a command from Allah. Fear Allah, so you fear Allah. So you bring in your heart this action that you are now in state of fear of Allah. You are afraid of the punishment of Allah. And then you hope for the rewards from Allah. And this is how to act with recitation of the Quran. And also وقال تعالى ألم يأن للذين آمنوا أن تخشع قلوبهم لذكر الله وما نزل من الحق. Has not the time come for the hearts of those who believe to be affected by Allah's reminder and that which has been revealed of the truth? And we talked about this ayah before. So this is ayah, as Anas radiallahu anhu, he said, عَتَبَنَ Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent to us this admonition only after 4 years. What's the matter with the hearts of the believers? Isn't it time for them that تَخْشَعَ قُلُوبُهُمْ لِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ? And the ayat of Allah, this is what it's supposed to be for. The ayat of Allah, the kawni ayat and the religious ayat. Everything that happens in our life leads us to this. So when we don't see in these ayat and the effect of it, that our heart is not having this khushu' to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that means we are not reacting to the ayat of Allah in the right way. And sins prevents and all kinds of things, as it's mentioned before. And the Quran, and the constant presenting our hearts and putting our hearts into the ayat of the Quran, the more that it removes the hardness of it. So ألم يأن الذين آمنوا أن تخشع قلوبهم لذكر الله وما نزل من الحق وفي حديث عبد العزيز بن أبي رواد مرسلا عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. This hadith mursal, and the mursal is one of the weak hadith, one of the types of the weak hadith. That means a tabi'i is not mentioning the sahabi. So this is one of the types of the weak hadith, that he said, إن هذه القلوب لتصدأ كما يصدأ الحديد. Indeed, these hearts تصدأ becomes rusted, rusty, كما يصدأ الحديد, as the iron becomes rusty. قيل فما جلاؤها يا رسول الله. They said, O Messenger of Allah, what will banish this and remove the rust? قال تلاوة كتاب الله وكثرة ذكره. The recitation of the book of Allah and regular remembrance of Him. So even the hadith is munkar, is not authentic, but the meaning of it is correct, and there are many ayat and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that proves it in this, and that's why he even said it's mursal, but to bring the meaning of what's mentioned here. So, and there is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ and the ayat Ar-Ran, as we talked about, Ar-Ran that covers the heart, and the authentic hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that ما من قلب إلا وتعلوه comes on top of it, the Sahaba, like the cloud when it covers the sun. And this is where the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith, فَسَلُوا اللَّهَ أَنْ يُجَدِّدَ الْإِيمَانَ فِي قُلُوبِكُم. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to renew the iman in your heart. مَا مِنْ قَلْبٍ إِلَّا وَتَعْلُوهُ سَحَابًا. There is no heart unless it covers it. It's covered with something. So جلاؤها, how to remove it, is with the dhikr of Allah, with the recitation of the Quran, with asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to revive and to renew one's iman. So this is the first point here, to remove the qaswa, and it's a lifetime mean. So now it's on a daily basis, as we said. Now when we know the importance of something, then the second thing is, this is the right manhaj of understanding the methodology. Then how to make dhikr. What is the way of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? How the Sahaba radiallahu anhu made dhikr. So the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he would recite the Quran daily. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam had certain adhkar. We should make sure that we make this as our jobs in this life, like one of which is the morning adhkar and the evening adhkar. Get the authentic hadith, something like the book of Hisn Muslim, Muslim Citadel, whatever, making sure that we don't skip it whatsoever, not even one of them, to the best of our ability, 100 times in the morning and in the evening. La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, lahul mulk wa lahul hamdu wa ala kulli shay'in qadir. We have to be patient, and we have to make sure that we say it, and we make sure that we work on our heart. This is a training thing every day till it becomes the norm, that a person is trying to focus, trying to bring the meaning in the heart and in the tongue, as he mentioned. And day after another, then it becomes the norm, especially when a person is following the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. The adhkar after the salawat, the adhkar when a person enters the masjid, leaves the masjid, enters the home, all of these different adhkar muwadhafa. And then the adhkar in general, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, Allahu akbar. The treasure of Jannah, one of the treasures of Jannah, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Hearing the adhan. If someone, this is sufficient reason why would a person come early for the masjid, for the salah, just to hear the adhan so that he can repeat after the muadhin because of the reward of it, and so on. So by making it, learning the way the Prophet ﷺ in the dhikr and the night prayer and so on, so that a person doesn't miss it. And again, the Quran, the Quran, the Quran. We have to make sure that we don't miss that on a daily basis. Even if someone doesn't know how to read the Quran, it's a sad reality that years passes and then we are still in the same level. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. We made the Quran easy. So فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ, is there anyone that to be reminded? And each one according to their capacity, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful. No need to burden oneself. And if it's every day something, for even 15 minutes, doesn't know how to read the Quran, he starts with something every day. Slowly then he becomes changed. Things changes every day. What a person is now is different going to be after 4 months, 6 months, 1 year, and so on. And then he goes to one level after the other. And the barakah of the Quran is amazing. Don't measure it with the physical means. Leave the matter to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The blessings of it is something that beyond one's understanding. And the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they were upon this. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud and others. They would not leave their home till they finish their portion of the Quran. What made him late coming out from his house? but he was doing his word of the hizb of the Quran, that not necessarily the hizb of the 4 rubu', the portion of the Quran that he made it upon himself that he has to do every day, whether it's during the night or if he misses it in the morning, but not to miss it. And the famous khatma of the Quran every 7 days, especially when someone hafid al-Quran, they used to make hifd of the sudur, the hifd of the Quran in their hearts, by reciting it till a person is addicted to it. When someone is addicted to something, he's not able to leave it. That doesn't happen overnight. With the consistency, with the sabr, especially with knowing that this is the shifa from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is a very detailed subject that we need to really learn it more and to make sure that we're upon it and to ask the people of knowledge so that we don't miss other rights in our lives. Because all of that is within the deen and the limits of the sharia. The second one, وَمِنْهَا الْإِحْسَانُ إِلَى الْيَتَامَ وَالْمَسَاكِينَ. The goodness, the benevolence of to the orphans and the poor. To the yatama, the orphans and the poor. To be kind to those who are weak. Those who might be neglected in the societies. Those who people of arrogance, they don't like to mingle with them. So this is one of the means to soften the hearts, takes the arrogance away. Because the arrogance, as the Prophet ﷺ, he said, بَطَرُ الْحَقِّ وَغَمْتِ النَّاسِ. The rejection of the truth and غَمْتِ النَّاسِ, looking down at people. And who are the most people that people look down upon? Oh, these weak ones, physically weak or poor. And a person has to watch what's in his heart, right? Not to look down upon them, but rather to look down upon oneself, to cure what's in our hearts. In the hadith, he says, Imran al-Jawni an Abi Huraira, and the same thing, the book they have, it's reported by Ibn Abi Dunya, أن رجلا شكى إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قسوة قلبه. A man complained to the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام about the hardness of his heart. فقال إن أحببت أن يلين قلبك فامسح رأس اليتيم وأطعم المساكين. يقول إسناده جيد. He said that if you would love that your heart becomes soft, يلين قلبك, فامسح رأس اليتيم, wipe over the head of the orphan. This is the sign of good gesture that you care for him. وأطعم المساكين, and feed the poor. And he said that the isnad of this hadith is jayyid, but then he mentioned, I would read just what he said afterwards. وكذا رواه ابن مهدي عن حماد بن سلمة ورواه جعفر بن مسافر قال حدثنا مؤمل قال حدثنا حماد عن أبي عمران عن عبد الله بن الصامت عن أبي ذر عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وهذا كأنه غير محفوظ عن حماد. So this is, Hammad is the narrator of the hadith. So he said this narration as if it's not really established from Hammad. ورواه الجوجزاني قال حدثنا محمد بن عبد الله الرقاشي قال حدثنا جعفر قال حدثنا أبو عمران الجوني مرسلا. This other narration is mursal وهو أشبه, and this is more likely, وجعفر أحفظ لحديث أبي عمران عن حماد بن سلمة. This hadith, some of the ulama, because of this, they said it's muttarib, it's not consistent, and the inconsistency sometimes because it came from many different ways that cannot be brought together and other things. But as he said, isnadu jayd, and some of the ulama authenticated the hadith. And the meaning definitely is correct. And there are evidences where shows the importance towards the yatim and the miskin. And he says, وروى أبو نعيم من طريق عبد الرزاق عن معمر عن صاحب الله أن أبا الدرداء, that Abu الدرداء كتب إلى سلمان, he wrote to Salman al-Farisi, ارحم اليتيم وأدنه منك, have mercy towards the orphan and make him close to you. وأطعمه من طعامك, and make him eat from your food. فإني سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وأتاه رجل يشتكي قساوة قلبه. I heard the messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم, and a man came to him, when a man came to him complaining about the hardness of his heart. فقال أتحب أن يلين قلبك, would you love for your heart to be soft? فقال له نعم, he said yes. فقال أدني اليتيم منك, make the orphan close to you. وامسح رأسه, and المسح is to wipe, so and rub his head. وامسح رأسه وأطعمه من طعامك, and feed him from your food. فإن ذلك يلين قلبك وتقدر على حاجتك. This is soften your hearts and makes you able to accomplish your needs. And accomplishing the needs, not the physical needs only, but the needs that you have when it comes to your heart. This is your heart. We don't have control over our hearts. So when we take these means, This is how it becomes easier for the person to soften his heart. And also this narration is weak, but the meaning again is correct. And al-yatim is the one that lost his father and he's still a child below the age of puberty. This is the yatim. That's why he needs attention, because the loss of the father, that means the upbringing and the things of that nature, and this is where the communities will be taking these means. And it doesn't have to be in one's community, also everywhere. And it's not just about money, as we see. It's not just about supporting someone financially. What's more important than that is to support them in the tarbiyah wise, to give them this mercy and to show them the affection and the compassionate, and to have the concern towards them, and to feed them. And it'am al-ta'am also, it's not just again about sending money or giving money. If a person wants to soften his heart, he does it himself. He goes and he gives in a way, of course, of not to be arrogant towards others, but to feed others. He would do it himself. He would make sure that he takes, if he has the means. This is definitely something that is of a different level when it comes to softening the heart. Not just about the rewards that a person gets, but also softening the heart. قال أبو نعيم ورواه ابن جابر والمطعم بن المقدام عن محمد بن واسع أن أبا الدرداء كتب إلى سلمان مثله, the same different narration that he wrote the same thing. ونقل أبو طالب أن رجلا سأل أبا عبد الله. A man asked أبا عبد الله يعني أحمد بن حنبل. He asked Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal رحمه الله فقال له كيف يرق قلبي? How can my heart be softened? قال أدخل المقبرة وامسح رأس اليتيم. Enter to the graveyard, go to the graveyard and rub the head of the orphan. You know, I'm not sure if different cultures understand this issue of rubbing the head of the orphan. It's not like, come here, I rub your head, leave. No, it's not like this. It's the show of care, right? So when you, and part of that is that you show this care that you have towards him. So this is really what it means, and also with rubbing the head of the child to show that you care for the child. And udkhul maqbara, and the maqbara will be mentioned. One of the means to soften the hearts is to visit the graves, as the Prophet ﷺ ordered us to do so. So this is with the orphans, so steps to be taken as a result of that. ومنها كثرة ذكر الموت. One of these means to soften the hearts is the frequent mentioning of al-maut, which is death, which is the reality that no one can ever deny, and at the same time the things that many people are in state of forgetfulness or neglect, when it's the reality that everybody will face. So why this is mentioned? Because this is what the Prophet ﷺ, he commanded us to do. And this is the author that he mentions here is one of the very amazing author, really. When it's every time you read it, you would think, subhanallah, how these people were so pure and sincere in what how they are truthful. They want to remove the hardness of their heart. He says ذكر ابن أبي الدنيا بإسناده عن منصور بن عبد الرحمن عن صفية, the wife of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, أن امرأة أتت عائشة تشكو إليها القسوة. A woman came to Aisha radiallahu anha, تشكو إليها, complaining to her about al-qaswa. Not complaining of her husband and money and this. She's complaining that her heart is hard. But that's not the point here. She said to her, Aisha radiallahu anha did not give her a lecture like this. She said, فقالت أكثري ذكر الموت. أكثري, that means remember death frequently. Not one time a day, frequently remember death. أكثري, al-ikthar, always remember death. يرق قلبك وتقدرين على حاجتك. Same last one is also repeated. يرق قلبك, your heart will soften. And وتقدرين على حاجتك, and you'll be able to fulfill your need, which is the softness of the heart. This is not in your capacity. You can't do that. It's not a decision. I decided to soften my heart. You can't. You can decide that I'm going to fear Allah, yes. You can decide that you're going to make salah, but you cannot decide soft my heart, you get soft immediately and then the heart becomes soft. It doesn't work this way. So for a person to be able to fulfill this need, this is the mean. أكثري ذكرى الموت يرق قلبك وتقدرين على حاجتك. So Safiya radiallahu anha, she said, قالت ففعلت. So the woman did that. فآنست من قلبها رشدا. So she sensed guidance in her heart. فآنست, الأنس is to be acquainted with something, to be comfortable with someone. فآنست من قلبها رشدا, she find that her heart had this sense of softness in it. فجاءت تشكر لعائشة رضي الله عنها. So she came back, Allah أعلم how long that it took. She came back to Aisha رضي الله عنها, thanking her, to thank her for such great advice that she gave her. The amazing part is that she did not take these. Oftentimes when we hear this, أكثروا ذكر هذه اللذات, sure, but then we don't do anything. Right? She took it seriously. That means she constantly would remember death till the effect of it happened to the heart. And she went back and she was thanking Aisha radiallahu anha. And of course the truthfulness of Aisha radiallahu anha, and how that word reached the heart, and how when a person asks and comes and for a distance to get to know something, to save himself from the hellfire and to be among the people of the Jannah, then he is truthful in applying what is being said. أكثري ذكر الموت يرق قلبك وتقدرين على حاجتك. And this is what the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام is going to mention the hadith. وكان غير واحد من السلف منهم سعيد بن جبير وربيع بن أبي راشد يقولون, more than one person from السلف, among them is سعيد بن جبير وربيع بن أبي راشد, they used to say لو فارق ذكر الموت قلوبنا ساعة لفسدت قلوبنا. If the remembrance of death فارق, departed from our hearts 1 hour, our hearts will be corrupted. Our hearts will be corrupted, because if it goes away from the heart, that means the heart is more attached to the ghafla and the forgetfulness of this life. And the hadith of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام وفي السنن, the authentic hadith عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, أكثروا ذكر هذم اللذات. The narration is with the dhal. You have here dal. Some had mentioned, because this can be dal or dhal, right? And both meaning give a correct meaning. But hadim is the destroyer, and al-hadim is also gets into the meaning of the same meaning of the destroyer of the heart, of the desires. أكثروا ذكر هذم اللذات, with the dhal, not with the zay, not hazim. Hazim is the one that defeats, but hadim is the one that ruins or destroys the desires. The dhikr al-maut, when we remember death, if we sincerely remember death, what happens? Either a person becomes terrified, he's scared, so he becomes sad. That's not what is meant by dhikr al-maut. For a person to be sad, I'm going to lose my family, no more seeing my wife and children and the loved ones, so a person becomes sad. This is not why a person frequently mentions death. Because when a person, what's meant by this is when someone remembers death, then he realizes, I'm in dar al-amal. I'm in the place of amal, actions. Because when death comes, no more amal. This is what's scary. No more actions. The book of deed is closed. So now a person goes to dar al-jaza. He goes to the dar of al-jaza, either Jannah or the hellfire. So then the frequent mentioning of death makes him focus on the amal in this life. Doesn't make him waste anything of his life if he's frequently mentioning death. So you do action, one action after the other. What's the sunnah? Learn, ilm, seeking provisions with the right intention, sleeping with the right intention. Everything becomes a person, even when he relax and have enjoyment with himself, with his family and things like this, is all counted for. So this is what is meant by it. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful. And He is the most just subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the best moment for the believer is the moment of death. So the most fearful thing that everybody fears becomes the most enjoyable moment whatsoever, ever, when a person returns to the mercy of Allah. So this is the benefit of frequently mentioning death, so that the amal is the concern of the person, and doing the good deeds would make the person forgive, forget, overlook. Who cares if he said this or she said that? The moment of, if a person frequently mentioning death, it doesn't matter at the moment of death. What makes us sad now, if it doesn't make us sad at the moment of death, then it's not that important in our life. Overlook it. And that's frequently mentioning death. A person remember death, then many things of our concern will go away, and many great benefits. And he says, وَرُويَ مُرْسَلًا عَنْ عَطَاء الْخُرَاسَانِي قال مر رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بمجلس قد استعلاه الضحك. And the hadith is weak, that the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام passed by a majlis قد استعلاه الضحك. If I missed something, if anything missed, correct me inshallah. I'm just, everything's okay? The order is okay, right? We're doing good. People were there laughing and their voice of laughing was loud. So فقال شوبوا مجلسكم بذكر مكدر لذات. شوبوا مجلسكم. الشوب is when something is put in something pure that makes it mixed. So mix your majlis, your gathering, with the remembrance of مكدر لذات, the one that disturbs the desires, makes you, if you're extremely happy, put you in the proper place. If you're sad, put you in the proper place. It won't make you too crazy one with happiness that makes a person forgetful, or extremely sad that will make a person depressed, for example. And it balances things up. And with these two extreme moments of emotions, people become forgetful, and many sins are committed as a result of that. What happens when people are extremely happy? Most likely sins are there. Look at weddings, and people are having so much fun. What do? They drink and they dance, and sins becomes easy because the emotions are high. When people are extremely sad, they might neglect the orders of Allah or say things that are bad. So that's why the remembrance of death put things in perspective. Imagine people in every لكل مقام مقال, yes, for every place is the best way to do things. I remember one of the brothers, there was wedding and in the masjid, and someone is reciting Quran, so he recited Surah Qaf, death and hereafter and things like this. So a brother told him, brother, this is marriage, this is wedding. Why are you reciting, something like this? And this was a bad thing for the one that advised him. What's wrong with that? This does not take the happiness away, actually. If a person is getting married for the sake of Allah, it's part of that to be reminded of what the most important thing. قالوا وما مكدر اللذات يا رسول الله قال الموت. So, but the hadith is weak. You guys are okay? We're waiting for a little bit, inshallah. Be patient, inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us reward, inshallah, and to make us among those who benefit from what we hear. He says, وَمِنْها, from these means زيارة القبور بالتفكر في حال أهلها ومصيرهم. To visit the graves بالتفكر, and reflecting في حال أهلها, in the state of its people, ومصيرهم, and their final destination. Now they reach their destination. This is the time of either rest for the believers or وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, the everlasting punishment for the disbelievers. So their state of its people and their final destination, to reflect upon this. There's no more amal for them, there's no more actions, it's only rewards or punishment. He says, وَقَدْ سَبَقَ قَوْلُ أَحْمَدَ الَّذِي سَأَلَهُ مَا يُرِقُّ قَلْبِي. The previous statement of Imam Ahmad, when someone asked him how to soften my heart, قال أدخل المقبرة, enter the graveyard. And أدخل المقبرة is not أدخل القبر. المقبرة is the graveyard, not the grave itself. وقد ثبت في صحيح مسلم, in the hadith in صحيح مسلم, authentic hadith, عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال زوروا القبور فإنها تذكر الموت. أو the other narration, قد كنت نهيتكم عن زيارة القبور فزوروها فإنها تذكر الآخرة. The narration Sahih Muslim doesn't have فإنها تذكركم الآخرة. This is in Sunan al-Tirmidhi, and it's also authentic, but it's not in Sahih Muslim, this extension. But the entire hadith is authentic. زوروا القبور, visit the graves. That's what the Prophet ﷺ said. In this narration, قد كنت نهيتكم عن زيارة القبور. I used to forbade you from visiting the graves. فزوروها, but then visit them now. Why? فإنها تذكر الآخرة, because it reminds you of the hereafter. So it was first forbidden, and then it was even encouraged to visit the graves. And people, when they visit the graves, they have many different also ways of doing it. Either the proper way, the sunnah way, or وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, the wrong way. Some people, they go to the grave to worship the graves. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. They call upon the dead, not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is shirk billahi tabaraka wa ta'ala. Some people, they go to the graves to seek blessings from the deceased. Right? And this is close to the shirk. They're not making dua to them. Just they think this spot is a blessed spot, so they sit there. Right? Even they make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. This is not the way of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and this is not why he said go visit the graves. And the sunnah way of visiting the grave is to, as we heard, to visit the graves, to say salam to the believers, to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for them. So you go to the grave to be a mean for benefit for the deceased, not to get benefit from the deceased, for you to benefit them by making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for them, and to be reminded of the hereafter, because this is where your place, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best when. So he says, وعن أنس أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال كنت نهيتكم عن زيارة القبور ثم بدا لي أنها ترق القلب وتدمع العين. I used to forbid you from visiting the graves, then it becomes clear to me that it softens the hearts. وتدمع العين makes the eyes shed tears. وتذكر الآخرة and reminds us of the hereafter. فزوروها, so visit the graves. ولا تقولوا هجرة, and do not say hujra. Hujra is the explicit or the bad words, al-fuhsh. Don't say bad words when you're visiting the graves. Don't curse. Don't fight with someone. Don't say things. Don't say anything bad. And the hadith is weak, Ahmad ibn Abi Dunya, but also falls into the meaning of visiting the graves and the effect of visiting the graves. وذكر ابن أبي الدنيا عن محمد بن صالح النمار قال كان صفوان بن سليم يأتي البقيع, used to go to البقيع, صفوان بن سليم, البقيع in Medina, في الأيام, in the days, فيمر بي, so he would pass by me. فاتبعته ذات يوم, I followed him one day, وقلت والله لأنظرن ما يصنع. He would pass by him, he would see him going to the البقيع, so he said والله I'll see what he's doing. What is he doing? قال فقنع رأسه, so he covered his head. وجلس إلى قبر منها, doesn't want people to see who he is. وجلس, he sat by one of the graves. فلم يزل يبكي حتى رحمته, he kept on weeping till I felt mercy towards him. قال ظننت أنه قبر بعض أهله, I thought this is maybe the grave of one of his families, so he's crying because of this. قال فمر بي مرة أخرى, so he passed by me another time. فاتبعته, so I followed him. فقعد إلى جنب قبر غيره, they used to see the ulama what they do in their actions, so he saw him sitting next to another grave, by another grave. ففعل مثل ذلك, and he did the same thing. فذكرت ذلك لمحمد بن المنكدر, he said I mentioned that to Muhammad ibn al-Munkadir. وقلت إنما ظننت أنه قبر بعض أهله, I thought this was one of the graves of his family, but he did it to another grave. فقال محمد كلهم أهله وإخوانه, all of them is his family and all of them are his brothers. إنما هو رجل يحرك قلبه بذكر الأموات كلما عرضت له قسوة. He is nothing but a man, he moves his heart by the remembrance of the dead every time qaswa, hardness, comes along into his heart. So he would go to the graveyard so that he soften his heart. قال ثم جعل محمد بن المنكدر يعود بعد يمر بي فيأتي البقيع. Muhammad ibn Munkadir, the one that he asked him. He said he would pass by me and he would go, seems like he was on the path going to Al-Baqi', and he would go to Al-Baqi'. فسلمت عليه ذات يوم, I said salam to him one day. فقال أما نفعتك موعظة صفوان, did the reminder of Safwan that you saw him going to the grave, did it benefit you? قال فظننت أنه انتفع بما ألقيت إليه منها. He was, the other one was going, so now the original person, he said, then I thought that he was the one that benefited from this maw'idha. He went to him to ask him, why would he do this? So he replied to him, he's about the third person that is doing that to benefit himself, and he benefited from it, and he would go also to visit the grave. وذكر أيضا أن عجوزا متعبدة من عبد القيس كانت تكثر إتيان القبور فعوتبت في ذلك. There was an old lady that متعبدة, worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from Abd al-Qais. She would go frequently to the graves and she was blamed, or why would you do this? فقالت, so she said, إن القلب القاسي إذا جفا لم يلينه إلا رسول البلا. First of all, for women, yes, there are differences of opinions whether it's permissible for them to visit the graves. And Aisha radiallahu anha, when Aisha radiallahu anha, she went to visit the grave of Abdurrahman ibn Abi Bakr, her brother, and she was told about this. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said, لعن الله زائرات القبور أو زوارات القبور, cursing the women, those who frequently visit the graves. She said the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam used to forbid, then he permitted us, referring to this hadith. So some stayed with the original hadith of for the women, and some said was part of what's forbidden, and then it was permissible. But the zawaratul qubur are those who frequently and they wail and they scream and they tear their clothes, do these matters of jahiliyyah, or mix with men. All of these things are forbidden. And if women do this nowadays, women go for the janazah and they mix with men, and they even put the dirt on the grave. And this is all not permissible. If it's not harming the deceased, they're harming themselves. They think they're doing a good thing for the dead person. This is harm him. This is annoys him. If it's correct to say, because الميت يعذب ببعض بكاء أهله عليه. When a person dies, he is annoyed, and that's what the ulama they said, unless he encouraged them to do so or made it in his wasiyah. When they wail or they cry with noise and do things against the sunnah for him, so he get punished if he had ordered them to do so, and he knew and he did not warn them. That's why it's something that should be written in the wasiyah. If a person knows that people might do these crazy things, he should write in his wasiyah, no this and no mixing, and we should try to do these things, especially when it becomes widespread. So anyway, but the words here, that is what is meant when she said إن القلب القاسي إذا جفا, the hard heart, when it's jafa, has the jafa, the dryness of it, لم يلينه, would not soften it, إلا رسول البلا, except the messenger of decay, which is death. رسول البلا, not Rasul, Rasul البلا. Al-bila is decaying. So when she goes to the grave, this is the messenger to its heart, the messenger of decay. وإني لآتي القبور, and I will go to the graves, وكأني أنظر إليهم, and as if I'm seeing them. This is how the heart works, and as if I'm seeing them. وقد خرجوا من بين أطباقها, as if they now are resurrected, they come out from its أطباقها, from the layers of the ground. وكأني أنظر إلى تلك الوجوه المتعفرة, and as if I see these faces that are dusty. وإلى تلك الأجسام المتغيرة, and these changed bodies and decayed bodies. وإلى تلك الأكفان الدنسة, and these coffins that are dirty. فيا له من منظر لم أصر به, what a scene that is, does not make me happy, or قلوبهم, what a picture which does not delight their hearts. فيا له من منظر لم تصر به قلوبهم, maybe ما أنكل مرارة الأنفس وأشد تلفة الأبدان. How النكال is the punishment, and مرارة الأنفس, the bitterness of oneself. So how tormenting is the loathing of the soul. وأشد تلفة الأبدان, and how severe and quickly is the destruction of the bodies that people take care of. This is what happened to it when it's in the grave. وقال زياد النميري ما اشتقت إلى البكاء إلا مررت عليه. قال له رجل وكيف ذلك. Every time I want to weep, I would pass by him. He said, how is that? He said, إذا أردت ذلك خرجت إلى المقابر. If I want to weep, I would go to the graves. فجلست إلى بعض تلك القبور, I would sit by these graves. ثم فكرت فيما صاروا إليه من البلى. Then I think and reflect of what decay they reached them. وذكرت ما نحن فيه من المهلة. Then I remember how we are in a break now. المهلة is delay. We've been delayed. Having a فرصة or مهلة. قال فعند ذلك تختفي أطواري. المهلة, it's another way to change the way we think for things. Al-fursa is the opportunity. We are in the opportunity. This life is just one chance. No one is going to come back to this world anymore. So when a person looks at this life as one chance, only one chance to be on the face of earth, to do amal, so then the person would again work and do the amal and follow the way the Prophet ﷺ. He said, فَعِنْدَ ذَلِكَ تَخْتَفِي أَطْوَارِي. When I do this, my atwar disappears. Atwar is my different states of my heart, the distractions, things like this. قَدْ خَلَقَكُمْ أَطْوَارًا, in stages. So the different stages in my heart disappears. Then he mentioned these lines of poetry, Rajib, whether it's belonged to him or from Hajar, some said. If we can just read a few lines, inshallah, just 15 minutes, inshallah, and we'll stop. Is that okay? And this actually very beautiful lines of poetry that is reminders of the reality of this life. he says, أفي دار الخراب تظل تبني وتعمر ما لعمران خلقت. أفي دار الخراب, admonishing the heart, giving the question, are you attempting to build something in an abode of ruin? This life is going to be ruined. You're not going to take anything with you. تظل تبني, you keep on building in the place of ruin. Right? You see the picture here. Someone builds in a place that is going to be ruined. So why you're building? That's why they used to build for whatever needs for them in this life, not to build for the sake of building. What just get them by in this life. وَتَعْمُرُ مَا لِعُمْرَانٍ خُلِقْنَا. وَتَعْمُر, keep on making عمران and buildings. مَا لِعُمْرَانٍ خُلِقْتَ. We have not been created to build and to this and that. We're created to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's the means versus the goal. The mean is to worship Allah. The mean, yes, the objective is to worship Allah. The mean is, yes, there's nothing wrong to have a comfortable life, but it's a mean, not the goal of this life. وما تركت لك الأيام عذرا لقد وعظتك لكن ما اتعظت. وما تركت لك الأيام, the days did not give you any excuse. لقد وعظتك, the days, the more the life goes on, the more that we get admonitions that we're coming closer to the end of this life. If you're young, you become old. Strong becomes weak. لقد وعظتك, the days gave you the admonition, لكن ما اتعظت, but you did not get the admonition. By the way, the mawa'idh, and this is something that maybe from different cultures might not understand the essence of it. They call it jaldu dhat, when you beat yourself. Right? It's a good thing. Right? It's not that a person is accused, or you're accusing me of this, that means I'm a bad person. No, it's admonishing the heart, softening the heart, to make the person humble himself. Not that, oh, he's ruined and that's the end of things, but it's a way to soften the heart, to make sure that, yes, everything is by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. تنادي للرحيل بكل حين وتعلن إنما المقصود أنت. The call, these days, every day passes, it's calling for al-rahil, it's calling you for the departing from this life, because it's coming closer and closer to the moment of death with every time. وتعلن, and as if these days are declaring clearly, إنما المقصود أنت. What is meant by that is yourself. Everything is what's meant by it is you, not someone else. وتسمعك النداء وأنت لاهٍ عن الداعي كأنك ما سمعت. وتسمعك النداء, and it make you hear the nida, the call, وأنت لاهٍ, but you're forgetful, you're in lahu, you're playing. عن الداعي, away from the caller, كأنك ما سمعت, as if you're not listening, as if you don't hear him. وتعلم أنه سفر بعيد وعن إعداد زاد قد غفلت. And you know that this is a long journey. This is a long journey that we cannot quit. There's no way to stop it. That's it. You reach the age of puberty. That means it's either the Jannah or the hellfire. And the journey to come is a very long journey. And this is just the beginning of it in this life. أنه سفر بعيد وعن إعداد زاد قد غفلت. If you have a long travel, then preparing the zad, the provisions, this is the wise person would do that. Take the provisions for his journey. And the day of judgment, 50,000 years long, and then everlasting life afterwards. All of that is by the zad, by the provisions that we take from this life. قد غفلت, you're forgetful about the zad. You're wasting your time without preparing yourself to the hereafter. تنام وطالب الأيام ساع وراءك لا ينام فكيف نمت. تنام, you're sleeping. وطالب الأيام, and the racing, the days are seeking you, after you. Nothing stops. The sun doesn't stop. The days doesn't stop. You cannot just stop it for some time for you to rest. وطالب الأيام ساع, diligently going وراءك, after you, as if it's death going after you, and one time he will get you, he will catch you. لا ينام, he does not sleep. فكيف نمت, so how can you sleep? معائب هذه الدنيا كثير وأنت على محبتها طبعت. معائب, the faults of this dunya, كثير. معائب with the hamza. There's so many the weakness and faults in this dunya, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created it this way. This is how perfected the dunya is, because it's created to be a test. This is not the Jannah. When people say Allah perfected the dunya, yes, He perfected it, of course. Perfected it to be a test. So معائب هذه الدنيا كثير وأنت على محبتها طبعت. And you طبعت, الطبع is you've been molded to love it. So that means you have to work against that by having the love of the hereafter. يضيع العمر في لعب ولهو ولو أعطيت عقلا ما لعبت. The life is wasted في لعب, playing and amusement. ولو أعطيت عقلا ما لعبت. If you're given عقل, reason, you would not play. But that's part of the mercy of Allah that we tend to forget so that we don't break, right? But it's not the original life is all about playing and this and that. It's the seriousness. If a person's have really complete mind, he would suffer from his perfect mind. That's why the la'ib and the lahu are just like the salt on the food. فما بعد الممات سوى جحيم لعاص أو نعيم إن أطعت. There is nothing after death. فما بعد الممات سوى جحيم, nothing but jahim, the hellfire, لعاص, for a sinner, أو نعيم, or delight, إن أطعت, if you're obedient to Allah. And this is again the way that when we say we need to call the youth by making the da'wah is let's play, let's this. This is not the da'wah of a salaf. No, we call them to the seriousness of this life. This life is short. We need to be serious in it. And after this life, it's either Jannah or the hellfire. This is the da'wah. The da'wah is not playing a game. Playing a game is not a da'wah. The da'wah is قال Allah, قال Rasulullah. Yes, you can get them to do something mubah, permissible, and then you advise them, sure, but it's not da'wah. Right? The da'wah is قال Allah, قال Rasulullah, and the message of the deen. And to give them that seriousness of the message. And the most people that's supposed to be the most serious in this life are the youth, not the opposite, because they have the means to gain as much as they can with the amal. You don't get tired quickly. You have the ability to work and to work hard and to build for your future, which is in the hereafter. So all of that, and we have in the companions رضي الله عنهم the best example. فما بعد الممات سوى جحيم لعاص أو نعيم إن أطعت, if you obey. ولست بآمل باطل ردا لدنيا فتعمل صالحا فيما تركته. There is no ولست بآمل, you have no hope whatsoever. It's a false hope to come back to this dunya. Once it ends, there's no return. You cannot even go back to yesterday to fix it, or the year before. So the same thing. فَتَعْمَلْ صَالِحًا, so that you would do righteous good deeds, فِيمَا تَرَكْتَ, for what you left behind. And when a person in this life, yes, you can fix all of the past by the mercy of Allah, by repenting to Allah. But the moment of death, it's too late. No more actions, no more repentance. وَأَوَّلُ مَنْ أَلُومُ الْيَوْمَ نَفْسِي. He says the first one that I would blame today is myself. Because it's the whole lines is tarakta, anta, you. And of course he refers to himself. وَأَوَّلُ مَنْ أَلُومُ الْيَوْمَ نَفْسِي فَقَدْ فَعَلْتُ نَظَائِرَ مَا فَعَلْتَ. The first one that I would blame myself today is myself. I have done the like of what you did. So don't think I'm better than you. أَيَا نَفْسِي. And then he addresses himself. Then he talks about himself. أَيَا نَفْسِي أَخَوْضًا فِي الْمَعَاصِي وَبَعْدَ الْأَرْبَعِينَ وَفِيتِ سِتَّةً. He says, oh my nafs, أخوضًا, you're indulging in sins. And you now 46 years old. So he was 46 years old when he wrote this. If it's Ibn Rajab, he died when he was 59 years old. Right, so أَيَا نَفْسِي أَخَوْضًا فِي الْمَعَاصِي وَبَعْدَ الْأَرْبَعِينَ وَفِيتِ سِتَّةً. And that means after the 40 years, وَفِيتِ, you completed 6 years. Still committing sins after all of these years. وأرجو أن يطول العمر حتى أرى زاد الرحيل وقد تأتى. He says, وأرجو, I hope, أن يطول العمر, that the life is made long for me, حتى أرى زاد الرحيل. For what reason? So that I can see the provisions of الرحيل, the provisions of departing from this life, the deeds, the provisions that he would take for the hereafter, وقد تأتى, when it's have been attained. This is the reason why they wanted to live longer, to have more actions, not to have the enjoyment of this life. No matter what a person, if a day or months or years is the most enjoyable thing ever, it's going to go away. But what matters are the good deeds. أيا غصن الشباب تميل زهوا كأنك قد مضى زمن وشبته. أيا غصن الشباب, or the vigor of youth, تميل زهوا, when the plant is young, it moves very beautiful, looks very strong. So the same thing with the youth when someone is young. كأنك قد مضى زمن وشبته. So it is time has elapsed and now you have become old. The time of the shabab goes away. And the same thing for the shabab. Before you know it, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you life, you will be old. and those who are old, and so on. So this doesn't stay forever. علمت فدع سبيل الجهل واحذر وصحح قد علمت وما عملت. علمت, now you have the knowledge and the hujjah has been established on us. We know now. علمت فدع سبيل الجهل, then stay away from the path of ignorance. واحذر, and be warned. وصحح, and correct yourself, rectify yourself. وصحح قد علمت وما عملت. You know, but you didn't act upon your knowledge. قد علمت وما عملت. And the ilm, when a person knows about death and about the hereafter, where is the amal? ويا من يجمع الأموال قل لي أيمنعك الردى ما قد جمعت. And the one that is keep on amassing and collecting wealth, tell me, is the death, الردى, destruction, would prevent you from what you had amassed? That means whatever you collected, الردى or death is not going to continue for you to have it. He's asking, is it going to prevent you from your wealth? The answer is yes. ويا من يبتغي أمرا مطاعا ليسمع نافذا من قد أمرته. ويا من يبتغي, and the one that you always want your commands to be obeyed. ليسمع نافذا من قد أمرته. Every time you give an order, you want to make sure that it goes through and people understand it and they fulfill your commands. We're talking about, we have different states in our life, one of which is someone has leadership or of a position. عججت إلى الولاية لا تبالي. أجرت على البرية أم عدلت. أجرت على البرية أم عدلت. عججت إلى الولاية. You're so greedy and so can't wait till you have it. So now you have the wilaya, the leadership and the authority, لا تبالي, and you don't care whether you أجرت. الجور is the ظلم, is the injustice. Whether you don't care whether you commit injustice to the human beings or you're just. أم عدلت. ألا تدري بأنك يوم صارت إليك بغير سكين ذبحت. Don't you know that when the day when leadership you acquired it, يوم صارت إليك, for you, بغير سكين ذبحت, you have been already slaughtered, but without a physical knife, because they used to run from leadership, because leadership, that means he comes in shackles in the day of judgment. وليس يقوم فرحة قد تولى بطرحة يوم تسمع قد عزلت. And this is also a beautiful meaning. وليس يقوم, the farha, the joy of قد تولى. قد تولى is when they say he has been attained the leadership. When they say, what's the word when they say he have been given the leadership? قد تولى, when people say, oh, he become the president. So this farha, this joy that you received, that they said you become the leader, it does not come into the same level as bitarha. Al-farha is the joy. The tarha is the opposite, is the sadness, is the misery. يوم تسمع, in the day when you would hear, قد عزلت. قد عزلت, you have been dismissed. Anyone in a position, a day would come, either in his lifetime they would say you're fired, you're kicked, it's not for you anymore, and that's a day of sadness for him, right? Or at the moment of death, it will be also removed from him. So people don't think of that when they have that moment of joy when they attain something. And actually this is the same thing when you come into a contract. You want a car so bad, doesn't care whether it's riba or not riba, wal-'adhu billah. So you got the car and you sign the contract and you're so happy, but you're not thinking how you're going to get yourself out of it, even if it's halal even, and you become in so much debt, right? But then after a few months, how am I going to come out with it, get out of this? So to look at the way out as the person get the happiness of getting into something. So we'll stop here inshallah ta'ala to finish the rest of it inshallah ta'ala tomorrow and whatever is left. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among those who their hearts are soft and to be obedient to Allah and to seek help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the most important ways to achieve all of this is the dua, to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help, and the tawfiq is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. And sorry for keeping you for so long, inshallah. Allah accept, inshallah.